Hi students, this is Miss Wildy. This is our video lecture over Chapter 12, Industry. I'm going to try and do this in one video lecture, but if not, it may be in two sections, so please make sure that you look for that if there is a second one. We're going to kind of break this up into different sections. The first section is about the Industrial Revolution, the causes, the effects, how it diffused into Europe and the rest of the world. And then we'll move into location theories and the major manufacturing regions of the world. And then lastly, the main focus on the second half is going to be sort of the modern manufacturing and outsourcing. So just pay attention. This picture, I like this picture a whole lot. It shows a shipyard near a port, and those are all containers. And this is about containerization. And those containers are what you see on the back of an 18-wheeler truck or the back of a train with cargo or on a cargo ship. And those are the same containers. They just move from one piece of transportation to another. And that's key to modern manufacturing today and modern industry today. So where did the Industrial Revolution begin and how did it diffuse? We know it started in Great Britain. We had to have that second agricultural revolution create a surplus. People are sitting around, they're developing new inventions for all the surplus of food, but also with new energy sources. So again, we start off with the water pump, and then we move into things like the steam engine and iron smelting, which creates steel. The way that industry used to be in Europe was actually the world, was all cottage industries. People would work in their homes and they would make things, and you would go to a friend down the street and have them, sew your dress or make you a table. And it was all done in that way. After the Industrial Revolution, it was never that way anymore. It was much more efficient to have factories with machines that made things quickly. And they just used the people to work the machines. So again, it started in Great Britain in the mid-1700s. Why Great Britain? Well, of course, we talked about the Second Agricultural Revolution, but also this is a key factor, the flow of capital. The flow of capital was coming from the colonies. Britain had lots of colonies at this point. They had lots of resources coming in, lots of money coming in. And so they had a lot to invest in factories, in industries. They also had this idea of mercantilism, which we've talked about before, where you have more exports than imports, which again led to understanding this need for colonies. They also have an abundance of coal, iron ore, and water power, and rivers. And those are all things that helped make the Industrial Revolution go quickly in Great Britain and then later into the rest of Europe. This is a great map showing you all of the arrows going back to Great Britain, back into Europe, from places like the New World, North America, Central America, South America, but also places like South Asia, East Asia, and even Southeast Asia. In terms of areas of development within Great Britain, again, we've talked about Manchester. We did an activity with Manchester showing that, but also I want to make sure we understand Liverpool is a major manufacturing region of Great Britain, as is London, major city, and also Newcastle for lots and lots of coal deposits and urban cities, factories. Development of the cast iron bridge. That bridge is still standing today, even though it was constructed in the late 1700s. And so that kind of development and inventions is really what changed the world forever. So how did it diffuse into mainland Europe? Well, certainly the places in Europe had to have coal and rivers as well. They needed to have the fuel source and the water for steam power as well. But later on, it also became places where ports were, because rivers tend to flow to the coast. And so this is that spillover effect, specifically with the Ruhr Valley. Germany and the Ruhr Valley is located around the Rhine River. And if you carry those boats up the Rhine River, they will eventually get to Rotterdam, which is a major port in the Netherlands, which means that the Netherlands becomes an industrial zone, an industrial region of Europe. So again, that's sort of how it's diffused. Later on, we have the railroad. That created very easy transportation of goods, which means that other cities decided to become more industrialized as a result of that. Last sort of point on this one I want to make is that The hinterland is the area sort of around a major city, and it typically is the one that actually might have the raw materials, but is influential in creating these city hubs and these industrial hubs of Europe. Again, this is a great map for showing you the diffusion from Great Britain or the United Kingdom through Western Europe. Here's the Ruhr Valley in Germany. Saxony is another region of Germany with major manufacturing. And then even further east, we have Silesia in Poland, Ukraine, and then also Moscow and Russia area are all major areas of manufacturing. St. Petersburg is also the oldest manufacturing city in Russia. It is the closest to Western Europe, and it's on a port, which is a major part for that. Paris also is important for manufacturing, and it's important that we make sure we understand it has to do with the fact that we are on the Seine River once again. And so the Rouen is an area at the head of the Seine River, again becoming that spillover effect, and how it has become a very industrial region still today. So, in terms of major industrial regions, we've of course talked about Western Europe, United Kingdom, moving into France, moving into Germany, Poland, and then we even get into Eastern Europe with Ukraine and Russia. So, Western Europe is a major industrial region. The United States and Canada are also major industrial regions. Look at these natural deposits of North America. We have lots of coal, we have lots of natural gas, oil. All of those helped create the manufacturing regions of North America. We also have Western Russia with St. Petersburg, with Moscow, Ukraine in Eastern Europe, and then also East Asia with Japan specifically at first. This is a map of the manufacturing regions of North America. Pay attention to the areas like Detroit, where we know we have a lot of car manufacturing. Milwaukee has a lot of that. Pittsburgh had a lot of that. New York is also mentioned on here as a break of bulk point. And this is a place, it's a port city. New York is on the coast, and it is where you will see cargo ships come in from Europe or the rest of the world, and the cargo containers are taken off the ship, put on boats, I'm sorry, not put on boats, put on trucks, put on trains, and shipped all over the United States. It also is the opposite direction as well, where you can have the containers come off trains and trucks and be put on a boat, a cargo ship that will then be shipped all over the place. So break of bulk points are very influential for industry, and we need to make sure we understand those. It's important to understand that this area in here is now called the Rust Belt, but we'll get to that a little bit later. It's because in modern manufacturing, a lot of these places were automobile manufacturers, and when the automobile makers decided that they should move that manufacturing to other countries for cheaper labor, these people lost their jobs, unemployment was higher, and a lot of those old factories rusted out, which is where we get the idea of Rust Belt. I also want to talk about sort of the idea of this growing service industry more in the southern United States, in the Sun Belt, but we'll also get to that again when we get to that section on modern industry. So this is a map of our regions of Russia. I've mentioned St. Petersburg. This is Moscow. Nizhny Novgorod is known as the Russian Detroit, meaning it's where its car manufacturing is. But you also have regions along the Volga River and within the Ural Mountains over here, and even as far with eastern, along the Trans-Siberian Railroad, that creates more diffusion of industry in Russia. We talked about Japan. I want to kind of stress a little bit about why Japan is such an industrial leader. It doesn't have the resources that you would expect, like that you see in Russia or North America or even Western Europe. They colonized. They looked at Great Britain and said, how did you industrialize? We're going to do the same thing. So they took colonies. They took over Korea. They took over China, and they used those resources for their benefit for many years. They also militarized their government and protected themselves with a strong military, and they moved their capital to the coast, again to encourage trade and shipping. Today we see more of this manufacturing in East Asia, more in China, especially with manufacturing of clothing, of toys. You know, we've talked about all the things that you can find in your house that are made in China. It's important to make sure you understand that Shenyang is known as the Pittsburgh of China. Beijing is an important region, the northern district. The Shang district and Shanghai are important districts for manufacturing. And then you even have some down in Hong Kong and other areas within China. We're going to talk a little bit more about those Asian tigers in a later slide, so pay attention for that. How have the geography and character of industrial production changed? Well, first of all, we have to talk about what's Fordist. Fordist is based on Henry Ford's method of the assembly line, where you have mass production done in one building. Every aspect of the product is brought to that building. It is manufactured there, every part of it, and then it is shipped out from that. We don't do that anymore. We have something called more flexible global division of labor, and this is considered post-Fordist. This is where we have part of the production done in this country and another part done in this country, and it's assembled here and then it's shipped from here. And that's sort of where globalization has brought our manufacturing. In terms of location theories, that's where we predict where a business should be located. In this chapter, it's how to predict where a factory would be or a industry would be. We need to consider our variable costs. These are our resources, our labor costs, the energy use, and our transport costs, shipping. And the friction of distance theory comes into play here. The longer the distance, the increase in time and cost. Those are very influential in understanding Weber's model. Weber's model is called the least cost theory. And he was very concerned with transportation, ideally, but all of these costs were important to him. But he said that the best place to locate your factory would be where you have the least cost, typically the least cost in terms of transportation. Weight would be a factor in this. I'm going to talk about bulk reducing and bulk gaining in just a second. Hotelling came up with the idea of locational interdependence. He was very much about this term agglomeration, where again you have businesses that have the same products, they locate near each other to help each other out in terms of shipping resources, of shipping finished products, in terms of having expertise with work. All of those things benefit by having agglomeration. Remember the video we watched about the ice cream vendors on the boardwalk? That's very much about hotelling. And then lastly, we talk about Losch. Losch's theory is the zone of profitability. Here's the graph related to it. And this has to do with, again, finding the area where you have the most income and the least cost, and that will be your zone of profitability. So these are your three theories that you need to keep track of in terms of where an industry would be located. We have a lot of effects of globalization that sort of make these not necessarily as applicable as they used to be, but it's still important that we talk about them, especially Weber's model. I've seen this on free response questions. I've seen this in multiple choice questions. I think it's important we understand that idea of least cost. And again, it has to do with this idea of if you have a bulk reducing industry, that means that you should locate near your resource because your resources weigh more than the finished product. So paper, again, it comes from trees. The tree is the heavier object than the paper. So you locate near the forest. That's a bulk reducing industry. That has to do with Weber's model. Whereas a bulk gaining industry would locate near the market. Meaning that your finished product is going to weigh more than all the resources that go into it. So a car, of course, is going to weigh more than all of the different parts that go into making the car. One other term that we kind of just put on this slide that's not in the book, but I think it's important to know, is a footloose industry. And again, this is one where it doesn't really matter where you locate because you're dealing with the typically transport of like information rather than an item or a specific tangible item. So computer software can be downloaded, can be sent via the internet, and so we kind of call that more like a footloose industry. This is where we're going to stop with this point of the video lecture. I will do part 2 as well, so please pay attention for that. Thank you.